wonder what chord that's played in. Da-da-da-da.
You would know better than I would.
Not an instrument player? No,
I
I played the drums, and I had an electric guitar growing up, but it was just to make noise and annoy my parents.
I played guitar for a bit when I was a kid, but I didn't stick with it.
Okay. All right.
Sports are the only thing I've ever really loved, like, like interests and all that.
Right. Yeah.
As far as like, hobbies, things like that, it's only been sports for me.
It's only sports for
I'm
Andrew
I'm
Mason.
a boring person. I really am a boring person.
I don't mind, because people are like, how's it going? I'm like, it's the same as it was last year. Is it mini camp yet? Like, my schedule for my life is based on what are the Broncos doing and what's happening in the NFL. It is Orange and Blue today. We are presented by Champ Honda, Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason. Hope everyone had a good weekend. And Mace, we're going to have a robust week with Broncos mini camp starting this week. So let's do a little mini camp preview for our viewers and listeners today.
Yes, let's. Why not? Where do you want to begin?
Mini camp preview. And
where about mini camp do you want to
Where about mini camp? I think it always starts with Russell Wilson. How is he continuing to look integrated into the Sean Payton system? How does that work out? I know everyone's got Nuggets fever, and tonight is absolutely huge. Hopefully they win it all. But I even heard Zach Bye tease it on Stokely and Zach for one Broncos segment in a day of Nuggets talk. And he's like, the Russell Wilson mesh with Sean Payton. So it's still a question out there.
It's kind of an important week. This is the only mandatory week of the off season. Mm-hmm. So this is where, when you take attendance, as we do up on the Hill, and we realize that players aren't there, it means something.
Yes, it does.
You can get fined for not being there if you're a player under contract at minicamp.
Yes.
This is it. This is the only 3 mandatory days that you have in the offseason. But that being said, yes, it starts with Sean Payton and Russell Wilson and how they're meshing, where things stand schematically. I'm actually curious to see, after we saw last week, the situational work. I'm curious to see what sort of situational stuff that they do tomorrow and Wednesday and Thursday. I'm also curious to see what the end of mini camp plan is, and we'll get into that as we get toward Thursday. But we've seen some teams cancel the last day of mini camp. We've seen some teams even call off entire weeks of off-season work so far.
I believe the Jets did that, if I'm not mistaken.
Didn't the Dolphins chop off like 2 weeks as well?
So. Yep.
Okay. Do the Broncos do that? Does Sean Payton do that? My instinct would say no.
That doesn't seem very Parcellsian.
And also, he did do them a solid by, in those first few weeks, only focusing on running and lifting and not having them do meetings in the classroom and work on the scheme. They effectively didn't start tackling anything schematic-wise, playbook-wise, until after 5 weeks into phase 2. So because of that, I'd say the solid was done for them earlier on in the offseason, allowing them to just focus on conditioning. And it wouldn't behoove them to take that last day on Thursday and call it a day off.
Yeah. And call it a day off and not a field day. I don't think we're going to get any of those with Sean Payton.
Well, here's the other thing, like with field day. It's like, oh, well, it's a team building thing, yada, yada, yada. Okay. First of all, your team building ought to happen when you're doing things like running and lifting, when everybody's getting pushed. And Dalrymple is, got the pedal to the metal on these guys. That's where the team building needs to be, coming together, right?
Yes.
When you're doing that, not from a bunch of, dunk tank and
egg toss
football and egg
three-legged race or whatever.
Yes. Okay. So in my opinion, the team building ought to be happening organically rather than some astroturfed type event like a field day can be. Secondly, if you're actually going to reward the players, you know what they appreciate more than a field day? A day off. Like calling it off and saying, you can go to Cabo or go home or wherever. You can go a day early now. Skedaddle. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, right?
Right.
That, I think, by and large, more players would appreciate than having to come in and, do the potato sack race.
And I think that is more likely for Thursday than having any sort of field day. So if the Broncos put in the work, and they're going to do that, because the coming together moments have been when they've been running and lifting and sweating next to each other and bleeding and like just working on just strength and conditioning. Then the football work, then the classroom work. Like, this is how they're gelling this year. So put in 2 days, and I would guess maybe we get a day off on Thursday.
Yeah. Wouldn't hurt us. We got a lot of work to do, you and I.
That we do.
This is our first live show today. This is not the first show we've done today.
Yes.
This is the 6th show we've done today.
Well, we'll keep the off-season content going after the Broncos go on.
But that
break.
requires putting some of it in the can. We should, a little peek behind the curtain. That's one of the things we've been doing today.
Yes.
So
the energy might be a little bit low because this is our 6th show today.
It's our 6th show today. We've been talking a lot.
We've been talking a lot. Got a lot to say.
We're cranking through them like they do Jeopardies and Price is Rights. Like just.
I would say Family Feud.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Jeopardy, I think, has more to it.
You'd be better on Jeopardy. I think I'd be better on Family Feud.
Just as long as when you're asked the question about what Popeye's favorite food is, you don't answer chicken. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Of course, yes.
Popeye's favorite chicken. And then she's like, look at that.
I can't believe it. What do you mean it's not chicken? I'm not gonna do the dance like you. I can't dance like that.
I can't dance either, but I did it.
You did it. That's right.
I embarrassed myself on regional television,
national television, worldwide television. It's
I
YouTube,
guess.
Baby.
Yeah, it's true.
It's everywhere.
That's true.
Minicamp preview for me also includes, what do the pass rushers look like?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does Russell Wilson look like? What do the pass rushers look like? We already know that Baron Browning's week 1 status is in question. Likely to begin camp on the PUP. You think he's going to begin the regular season ready to go? I said PUP might be an option. We'll see.
An option, but you don't want to necessarily.
You don't want to exercise that option.
The problem, that's the thing. Like, if he's on the PUP at the start of the regular season, you're not going to see him until after that first Chiefs game. Mm-hmm. So that would not be a capital development, I would say.
Right. So the development of Jonathan Cooper, something that, we've seen him make those positive strides this offseason. I don't know how much we could say, but okay, Jonathan Cooper.
He's impressed.
What do we see from a Frank Clark, right? Okay, there's pass rushing questions with this team, in addition to, well, how's Russell Wilson still doing?
Yeah. Clark, of course, I's dotted, T's crossed, and the contract will be there. So you want to get him up to speed. He's a pro. I think he's going to figure things out. I'm not particularly concerned about where he stands. I think the one thing is that he was not a part of the conditioning work in the last several weeks. So where is he at conditioning-wise? I'm sure he's been working out on his own, but maybe there's some extra work to do to kind of get him up to speed, and even for him acclimating to the elevation. So that's probably more going to go on at training camp, but I think you'd like to get him started here this week, kind of get the ball rolling, because there's a decent chance that he's going to be asked to start in week 1. Yes, even if Randy Gregory's healthy. If Baron Browning, if he's on the 53, but he's still being eased back into work, then it's going to mean a heavy workload for Frank Clark.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate.
Early season, be ready for that. And we can see these times where bodies can change. I remember years ago, my buddy CJ Anderson showed up about 240, 250. And Eric Studesville was not happy with him, but by training camp, so in a mere matter of 4 weeks, he was like 219. Remember those days? And he was like, I've been working out. Well, mini camp, he didn't look like that.
Was he on the soda plan?
Let me finish.
Yeah.
Let me go bowling with CJ Anderson. But either way, we can see those type of health statuses, those physiques change between the time of mandatory minicamp and between the time of training camp. And I think entering training camp, for me, Mace, at least, with this team, with this much to prove, with Sean Payton trying to find out who are his guys, I want him to hit the ground running when August is here.
Yeah, and of course, they still have to ramp up when they get to training camp in terms of building up to actually putting on full pads and going full tilt. But once they do that, you talk about hitting the ground running, and we flash back to last year when every third day the Broncos weren't running. it was euphemistically called a jog through.
Soft J.
Soft J. A
Jog through?
Well, I feel like people were yawning when they were watching the jog through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt sorry for fans who made plans to go to training camp.
On a visceral level, that really bothered me.
Yes.
Because, look, a fair amount of fans, I get it. They're coming from a few miles away. But there's a decent amount of people who are at every training camp practice who are coming from Pueblo, Cheyenne, Sterling, Glenwood Springs, you name it, right? That are putting in some serious effort to come down and watch practice. And a lot of those poor people came down and saw guys basically standing around. Hat day, visor day.
Right.
So that bothered me, in addition to the actual effects for the team of losing those days, and the fact that it turned out it did nothing to have the team be better conditioned and able to avoid injuries.
Yeah. So be damned your analytics from Green Bay, Nathaniel Hackett. Like
maybe it just doesn't work at elevation.
Football shape means
and some of it's
football.
luck, and I think there is some bad
True.
luck. There was some bad luck involved. It was a perfect storm of things, but I get that some players do need recuperation, but then you hold those guys out and then you let the young guys go. That, frankly, and this is another thing, if you are in that bottom 25 of the 90-player roster and you're fighting for a practice squad spot, you need all the reps you can get.
Yeah.
And so if you're saying every third day is going to be a jog through day,
that does you no good.
Yes, exactly.
If you're Brandon Johnson, who can ball, you got to go out there and prove it every day so you can make the 53. A jog through does you zero help. It helps you out in zero factor.
Maybe a bad example because he still managed to make it in the end. But still, I get your point.
Right. So it gets my point to
this
year.
Were there other Brandon Johnsons that we didn't know about that never had the chance?
That we couldn't find out about because they were doing jog throughs. Jalen Virgil?
He's still around.
I like Jalen Virgil. I do. I like Brandon Johnson.
Jalen Virgil goes in a very straight line very fast.
Yes, he does.
The rest he's got to work on.
Yes.
But he can go in a straight line forward very fast.
He could be a dangerous return man. And I guess, will you be watching special teams at minicamp?
I'm always watching special teams.
You are watching special teams. I would usually be tweeting during special teams, but we can't have our phones out at minicamp now.
Although I'm really hoping that they have another kicker come in so I can at least chart some kind of competition this summer. Right now, it's just Elliott Fry.
Yeah.
And Riley Dixon, I don't think is going to have competition at punter. I think that job is his lock, stock, and barrel. Right. By the way, Elliott Fry wearing number 39. Can you get used to kickers having numbers like that?
No, not at all. Not at all. Who's 39 that you think of with the Denver Broncos? I have an answer, which won't
Kyle
surprise
Johnson.
You. Very good one. Syracuse.
Fullback.
Right? He did the
Carlton.
the pony ride,
Didn't
right?
He did the Carlton?
The Carlton too.
Yeah, as well. He did the pony. Yes.
So as a rookie, CJ Anderson wore 39.
That's right.
Yeah, but Kyle's that's a good pull.
Didn't CJ in training camp wear number 9 too?
Perhaps because that was his number at Cal.
And then he became 39 because he couldn't have 9. Yeah.
Right.
I'm okay with the Wild West of numbers. I mean, if it were up to me, you'd have linemen in the single digits. I think that's awesome. When I see a lineman wearing like number 6, I think it's great. More of that, please. Like Randy Gregg, he's an edge rusher. Randy Gregory, number 5. I think that's awesome. I think he's got to play a little bit better, be worthy of it. I'm going to Deion Sanders mode here. You got to earn those numbers. Randy Gregory last year didn't earn 5, but
Ray Crockett.
That's a good one.
That's a great one.
Crockevelli, baby.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There you go. All right. So Orange and Blue today, we are presented by Champ Honda. Can Cortland Sutton be the wide receiver 1? Can he be the number 1 wide receiver? And going back and looking at what Marcus Colston did with the New Orleans Saints, looking at what Michael Thomas did with the Saints, both big-bodied receivers, and both making plays on more outbreaking routes, posts, corners, 9 routes, more deeper routes. Sutton, and they didn't ask me to take it down, so I feel I can say it. Sutton has looked more explosive this year. Trust me, and he has not looked like that since he was a young player. And then looking at the route tree of Jerry Jeudy. Again, shout out Matt Harmon, reception perception. Jerry Jeudy doesn't do anything unless it's a screen pass and it's an across, which is what we call them. Like it's going to be within 8 yards. But that Colston role, you're going drag routes, you're going post corners, these, Michael Thomas like routes. Somebody's going to get those. Somebody's got to get that Michael Thomas treatment. Why can't it be Cortland Sutton?
Can he run slant routes as effectively as Michael Thomas? That's the question I have.
If he's more explosive, my answer would be yes.
Yeah, see, that's where I've got to actually see it when it matters. I'm not there yet on Cortland Sutton.
Is it more pads come on type of thing?
Yes.
Because he is moving better.
He's moving better, but the pads aren't on yet. I've got to see it. I like the fact that he's studying Michael Thomas. I mean, if you're going to aim to mimic somebody in a Sean Payton offense, that's the guy you want to model yourself after. Yeah. So study that. The question is the body going to be able to do what the mind believes it can do? That's, that I think is the question we're going to get answered, because one thing on Cortland Sutton, he's looked more explosive out here so far this summer, but there were moments last summer where he looked like he was more spry than he turned out to be. So I'm very much in wait and see mode. I mean, we're sitting here right now and we are roughly 33 months from the ACL tear that he had that day in Pittsburgh back in September of 2020. And he hasn't looked the same since.
There should be plenty of time.
Yes.
Plenty of time.
This is it. Like, Edward Wright says, it's an important year for Sutton. He knows there's stiff competition. I think the competition has something to do with it, because you do have Jerry Jeudy, who I think Sean Payton's clearly very high on Jerry Jeudy. And then you have Marvin Mims Jr. coming in, who's going to be pushing down the line. And effectively also for Cortland Sutton, I mean, you're starting to look at that contract and say, okay, is the juice worth the squeeze here on number 14? It's a big moment for him. And if Mims ends up emerging and Jeudy is who Sean Payton believes he can be, the question is there room at the end for both Tim Patrick and Cortland Sutton? And maybe they're fighting for one spot.
Right. And we have to ask the question, is one of these guys going to get dealt? Or one of those two big-bodied receivers? Because Mims, who we can only say so much, but he looks as advertised. I feel safe in saying that. Jeudy and the praise from his head coach. I feel safe in saying that.
Yeah.
Sutton Patrick, one of those big guys could be Thomas Colston, one of that sort of role. I just made a new person.
Thomas Colston.
Yeah, a Michael Thomas or Marcus Colston.
Well, Marcus
Hofstra
Michael
and Ohio State. Can't guard
Michael Marcus or Marcus Michael.
Can't guard Marcus Thomas Colston. Mike. Anyway, like you can't guard him. Okay.
Michael Thomas, 6'3", 212.
We can kind of guess that KJ Hamler probably won't make the team. So does Tim Patrick make the team or Cortland Sutton? And I'm talking about getting traded. With Hamler, it'd more just be getting cut.
Well, don't forget with Tim Patrick, he's got one less year on his contract than Cortland Sutton does. So his contract you can get out of after this year pretty cleanly. KJ Hamler, if he is healthy in camp, I would not at all be surprised to see the Broncos maybe try to showcase him, but showcase him for a trade in the preseason. Get to where we say, okay, you can take a look at him, show that he's back from the injury. I don't think there's room, even though I love the possibility of getting some snaps with Mims and Hamler if you can do it. If you're in terms of roster space, I just don't know if there's room for both of them.
Would you even be able to get what you got for Trinity Benson with a featured KJ Hamler? My answer is no. And I love Hamler's speed. We all know the kid can flat out fly. I think he's been really good to talk to. I think he's very insightful, very smart player. Like, I love KJ Hamler.
So basically,
I just don't think you can get what you got for Trinity Benson.
So what you're saying is, and this is the parameters of the deal, the Lions sent a 5th and a 7th to the Broncos for Benson and a 6th.
You can't get that. Do you think you could get that?
Man.
Would someone give a 5th and a 7th for Hamler and a 6th? No. No, you might get a 7th rounder. If you trade KJ Hamler, you might get a 7th
rounder.
Oh, God.
Maybe it can be a 6th rounder if he meets certain incentives that are unlikely to be met.
Okay.
But KJ Hamler doesn't have much value right now. Which is why if you can squeeze him in, you might be better off finding a way to keep him. But the problem is, are they going to keep that many receivers? Let's start going through it here. Sutton, Jeudy, Patrick, Mims, you could keep Hamler as the 5, but you also need a receiver who's going to be kind of in that gunner role, right? And that's where you start looking at Marquez Callaway, for example.
Callaway can do some good
Brandon
things.
Johnson. If you're talking about a receiver who can handle some return work, I mean, there's
Jalen Virgil.
There's Jalen Virgil. Again, I'm not going to say too much. I don't think the door is completely closed on Montreal Washington just yet.
I think it is, but you also saw an extra day that I didn't see. So we'll talk off
I don't.
But how many tight ends is this team? I think the tight end conversation has to be part of the wide receiver conversation because you're going to keep a wealth of tight ends, and that's going to cut into how many wide receivers you can keep.
Troutman, you're going to keep Dulcich. You're going to keep Manhurts. And then do you keep Albert O, even though he's not a factor on special teams?
Probably not.
Yeah, and this is, again, the back of the depth chart. It's not necessarily who the best player is at that position. It's the best player that can also handle a special teams role. Jose mentions Kendall Hinton. Yeah, he's going to be in the mix too. So the point being, KJ Hamler, unless they see him as a multi-factor special teams player, and that's the key thing, not just returner. We're talking about being a returner and a gunner. Okay, you have to do both.
Yeah.
If you're going to stick as one of those guys on the back end of the receiver room, and that's why you are talking about maybe a Brandon Johnson ahead of a KJ Hamler, because I think Brandon Johnson can be a gunner. I think Jalen Virgil can be a gunner, but I don't see that in KJ Hamler right now. So KJ Hamler to be on the 53 for this team this season, there probably has to be an injury or two to make that happen.
A trade and an injury.
Maybe.
Or an injury or two.
A trade to somebody else.
Yeah.
Trading
injury. Sutton.
A trade, Patrick. An injury. That's what it might take for KJ to be on the 53.
And then he's got to stay healthy. Because my question to you, Mace, if you won't get what you got for Trinity Benson, and I don't think you will, is it even worth the time to showcase him? I get what you're saying. Teams do it a lot, but I would rather get Marvin Mims that work. Mims is the future for this team at that position. I don't think he's a 1. I think he's a damn good 2. But man alive, Mims can be everything that you think he can be.
I think there's room to get him some snaps and get Mims to work. I think there's room for all of it.
Preseason work, fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
You're gonna, even though it hasn't been officially announced, all indications are there's going to be at least one joint practice too with the Los Angeles Rams before that preseason finale here in Denver. So I think there's room for it. I think where there's a will, there's a way. You know, if you really get creative, you can find snaps for people.
Okay. The conversation continues. It's Orange Blue Today, presented by Champ Honda. Some sad news from Broncos country today is the passing of Jim Turner, from the AFL to the NFL, to the broadcast booth, to the Broncos Ring of Fame. Former Broncos kicker passed away today.
Yeah, he established a great many of the standards for kicking that eventually Jason Elam, Brandon McManus would surpass. Came to the Broncos in 1971, kicked for them throughout the decade. Actually, for several years, had the longest field goal in Super Bowl history. A 47-yarder
against Dallas,
Super Bowl 12.
Yeah.
And of course, if you've seen that clip, he's one of the last straight-on kickers. Boom, just lined up, kicked it, old school. The funny thing on Jim Turner is that the most famous play he made may not have been a kick as a Bronco. It may have been the catch of the fake field goal against the Raiders in 1977, the win in Oakland when the Raiders were the defending champions. That you could really say that win legitimized the Broncos as a contender right then and there. There were some questions. They go out to Oakland. They wall up the Raiders. Turner has the biggest play of the game. He's wide open, perfectly executed fake. And he's, kind of, strolling into the end zone in those high top cleats that he had back then. And for his era, like, even though you look at his percentages in today's light, and I'll just go through the field goal percentages that he has as a Bronco. 66, 69, nice, 67, 52, 75, 71, 68, and then at the end of his career, 50 and 62. So you'd say, oh, those aren't that impressive. But in his era, it actually was. He was one of the better kickers in the NFL while he was a Bronco, and in all of pro football, including those 7 years they spent with the New York Jets. And as David mentions, did great radio. Like he was in broadcasting in this market for a long time. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, when the late Bob Martin was ill not long before he passed away in 1990, I believe Jim Turner actually filled in on the Broncos radio broadcast in Super Bowl 24, along with Larry Zimmer when Bob Martin, who was trying to call that game, it would have been his last game as a broadcaster, fell ill. It turned out Bob Martin's last game was actually the AFC Championship a fortnight before. But I believe Jim Turner did call the Super Bowl and did some sports talk in this market for a long time, and worked for NBC. Did some games in the booth for NBC.
As a color commentator.
Yes.
Yep.
A kicker as a color commentator. You don't see much of that. I mean, Jay Feely has done that off and on.
Right.
Jim Turner did that back in the day. Of course, like Pat Summerall was a former kicker, but he was play-by-play for most of his career too.
Yes. So. Yeah. And I would encourage that in the booth because, like, former quarterbacks always aren't great. I understand some can be very good, but like just insight into the game, please. Got to give us something. Turner gave us a lot.
That's the thing, you know, and he was very, very loquacious, very talkative. And then also worked a lot of years with high school kids as well, I believe. Which high school was he at? Was he working at for a long time?
Well, I believe he lived in Arvada, correct?
Yeah. So when he had, so he was at Arvada High School. I'm looking this up now. This is a great show, by the way, when I'm looking up.
David says he's erudite like Mace.
Oh, well, I'm struggling with my erudition right now.
I don't even know what that means, so there you go.
Yeah, it means just, you know, well spoken. Yeah, the field at hang on here, at Jefferson High School is named Jim Turner Field.
Okay. There you go.
How about that? Yep, there it is. The field was named after former Bronco kicker Jeff Turner, or Jim Turner. The Jefferson Athletic Field sign that, like, at one point needed to be replaced, but yeah, you can't see it. But I'm looking at a picture. It says Jim Turner
look at
Field. Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, wow. Jim Turner Field. Nice.
Jim Turner Field.
And in the Broncos Ring of Fame in the late 80s, I believe is when he
got in? Broncos have Jim Turner, Jason Elam, and Gene Mingo, of course, who was basically jack of all trades, but 3 kickers in the Ring of Fame.
Been pretty blessed with this franchise to have some great kickers. Jim
Turner, and that's another thing. When you look at it, and when you look at it starting with Jim Turner in 1971, he handles the role basically for the rest of the decade. Late in 79, Fred Steinfurt comes in. He's the kicker for a couple of seasons. But then you go to Rich Carlos for 7 years. Then David Treadwell for 4. Jason Elam for 15. Matt Prater for 6 years. Brandon McManus for basically 8.5 years, because there was the half season in 14 when Connor Barth was there, and then they had a competition in the 2015 training camp. But you think about that. I mean, with just that little, the exceptions of the little interregnums for Connor Barth and Fred Steinfurt, every kicker has had a notable run here of at least 4 years. It's been one of the more stable positions, and now you have Elliott Fry. We'll see what he does. But Sean Payton, in his first 10 years as Saints coach, had 10 kickers. So we'll see.
We're fixing to find out.
We are used to stability. And the thing is, that stability started with the late Jim Turner. Rest in peace, number 15. The original number 15, by the way.
Yes. RIP to Jim Turner. That is a wrap for today's Orange Blue Today, presented by Champ Honda. We will both be out at mandatory minicamp. Whew. We got a busy week for you all coming up. So thank you all for watching. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on Twitter at Mace Denver. I am at Cecil Lammey saying OBT is a BFD. So make sure to smash the freaking like button.
Wow, that's
like,
vigorous.
Comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. And as always, be safe, be kind, know that you are appreciated. Stay tuned and please stay frosty.